interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, by air, President Roosevelt has just announced. The attack also was made on all naval and military activities on the principal island of Oahu. We take you now to Washington.
The details are not available. They will be in a few minutes. The White House is now giving out a statement. The attack apparently was made on all naval and military activities on the principal island of Oahu. The President's brief statement was read to reporters by Stephen Early, the President's secretary. A Japanese attack upon Pearl Harbor naturally would mean war. Such an attack would naturally bring a counterattack.
Pearl Harbor happened December the 7th. I was very shocked about it. I thought, well, this is the start of the war. And that's when the war started, December the 7th. And I was very unhappy about it, and so was everybody else in the United States. In fact, I was working in the factory at the time, defense factory, when that happened. On a Sunday morning, I remember going to work on a Sunday morning, and the announcement came over radio that Japan was bombed, and there was over 3,000 GIs got killed that day, in one day.
As Japan became more hostile, FDR wanted to take action despite the fact that most Americans did not want to go to war, especially during the Great Depression. A man named Arthur McCollum had the solution, a memo laying out what was going on in the world and 8 courses of action to take without directly going to war with Japan. We would provoke them instead of going to war.
America is faced by a hostile combination of powers in both the Atlantic and the Pacific. Both Japan and Germany pressured the United States by their naval movements during the 1940s through 1943. We see this when Japan invades the Philippines, China, Thailand, and Malaysia, and when Germany invades Poland, Belgium, Denmark, Norway, and Holland, and in 1940 when German Navy blockades the British Isles. Both Japan and Germany were getting very aggressive. To prove this, Germany and Italy and Japan joined forces and signed the Tripartite Treaty, creating what is known as the Axis. While they invade these countries, they are creating a two-front war if the United States decides to join. During this time, all the League of Nations could do was create embargoes, while the United States declared their own embargo of oil against Japan with the help of the Netherlands. British naval control of the Atlantic prevents hostile action against the United States in this area. Britain fought off German 1940 blockade and protected U.S. merchant ships using blockades. The Battle of the Atlantic pitted U-boats and other warships of the German Navy along with aircrafts of German Air Force against Allied merchant convoys. Thanks to Allied convoys, German attempts to starve British failed, but also protected U.S. merchant ships from attack. Japan's growing hostility presages an attempt to open sea communications between Japan and the Mediterranean by an attack of the British lines of communication in the Indian Ocean. The attack of the British lines in the Indian Ocean came to a surprise to the British government and eventually ended in little fighting in the Indian Ocean between the Japanese and Allies throughout World War II. British Allied patrol of the Indian was split up into 2 groups, one stationed in Colombo and the other refueling the day of the Japanese attack, the 5th of April, 1942, in Atu, nearly 1,000 kilometers away. Britain was preparing to defend their ship trade in the Indian Ocean, but the Japanese attack on Colombo was unexpected. Japanese attacks on merchant ships had been going on in the Indian Ocean since March 31, 1942, but the invasion of the Sierra Leone never came, ending the conflict in the Indian Ocean on April 9, 1942. Japan did not want to invade Sierra Leone. The offensive was a defensive maneuver to raid the British forces and provide cover for their own troop reinforcements being sent to Rangoon by sea. As a result, the Japanese then withdrew and for the most part left India and the Indian Ocean alone for the rest of the war. Japan must be diverted if Britain opposition in Europe is to remain effective. The United States diverts Japan away from Britain by bombing their cities and invading a Japanese-held island in the price of island hopping. An example would be on September 1, 1945, when the United States lands in the Philippines. The United States slowly makes their way up the Pacific to get to the mainland of Japan by island hopping. This thus commits the Japanese Navy to play defense. The United States naval forces now in the Pacific are capable of so containing and harassing Japan as to nullify her assistance to Germany and Italy. Between 1941 and 1945, the United States gains the ability of bombarding Japan because of campaign of island hopping to Japanese mainland. The United States also started strategic bombing campaigns that served well in Germany against military and industrial complexes. The United States used island bases such as Philippines to launch aircrafts such as bombers. For example, on August 4, 1942, the USA bombers dropped firebombs on Tokyo, Yokohama, Osaka, Kobe, and Nagasaki.
On August the 6th, 1945, two American Super Fortress bombers arrived over the Japanese city of Hiroshima on the world's most devastating military mission. The Enola Gay, with Colonel Paul Tibbets at the controls, was about to drop the first atomic bomb, a weapon conceived by a group of international scientists based at Los Alamos in the United States. So far, no one knew exactly what effect the bomb would have, either on the unsuspecting inhabitants below or on the crew of the plane itself. They were soon to find out.
As the bomb went off, the whole inside of the airplane just lit up as if someone had set off a flashbulb. And then we had to wait. This was our big worry, is what would the blast do when the blast got to the airplane? And finally the blast did arrive. It was like being in an ash can and getting someone kicking. And then we crowded to the window and saw just the whole city completely covered in smoke with this very tall mushroom cloud rising from it.
President Truman had already threatened the Japanese with a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth. When the truth was revealed, his words seemed an understatement.
It is in the interest of the United States to eliminate Japan's threat in the Pacific at the earliest opportunity by taking prompt and aggressive action against Japan. The United States did not want war with Japanese to last any longer, so aggressive actions were taken with relatively new, untested weapons. This thought of ending the war as quickly as possible was demonstrated with the atomic bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. The justification of using these weapons was it would spare more American lives versus the alternative land invasion. President Truman also justified the air offensive by saying that the city was an industrial war city and that the target in Hiroshima was military bases.
They hated the Japanese.
Why? Why did they hate the
The
Japanese?
American people didn't like the Japanese that were in this country because they were in war with United.
In the absence of United States' ability to take the political offense, additional naval forces should be sent to the Orient and agreements entered into with Holland and England that would serve as an effective check against Japanese encroachments in southeastern Asia. The United States has a strong defensive position and should arrange with our allies to stop Japanese encroachments. Evidence is shown as the Philippine Islands are still held by the United States. Friendly and possible allied government is in control of the Dutch East Indies. British still hold Hong Kong and Singapore and are favorable to the United States. Important Chinese armies are still in the field in China against Japan. A small U.S. naval force capable of seriously threatening Japan's southern supply routes are already in the theater of operations, and a considerable Dutch naval force is in the Orient that would be of value to allied United States. By utilizing our allies' territories and militaries, the United States will be able to prevent Japan from invading any further. They made an arrangement with Britain for the use of British bases in the Pacific, particularly Singapore. They made arrangements with Holland for the use of the base facilities and acquisition of supplies in the Dutch East Indies. They gave all possible aid to the Chinese government of Chiang Kai-shek. They sent a division of long-range heavy cruisers to the Orient, Philippines, and Singapore, and they also sent 2 divisions of submarines to the Orient. They kept the main strength of the U.S. fleet now in the Pacific in the vicinity of the Hawaiian Islands and kept insistent that the Dutch refused to grant Japanese demands for undue economic concessions, particularly oil. Finally, they completely embargoed all U.S. trade with Japan in collaboration with a similar embargo imposed by the British Empire. These courses of action were taken to provoke Japan into starting a war. The United States could take all of these actions against Japan and not have to engage in war unless they made the first move. Japan's response came exactly 14 months later when they attacked Pearl Harbor, starting the beginning of the war with Japan. World War II was the most deadly and costly war of all time. After the devastating effects of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Japanese surrender agreement made all war equipment, planes, and naval weapons reduced, and the industries that made them dismantled as well. On May 3, 1947, Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution prohibited any acts of war by the state entirely. With the Allied forces closing in, Hitler saw no other way out than to take his own life on April 30, 1945. Nazi Germany crumbled immediately after. Nazi Germany was split into Communist East Germany and non-Communist West Germany. The Nazi Party lost control, and key members were tried for war crimes. The United States, during the 1930s, were in a still recovering from the Great Depression. The United States gained many scientific advances and a huge boost in industry from the production of arms and resources to equip fighting forces. The World War II helped the United States become number one again.